Dilshan, thanks for joining me.
Thank you very much for having me.
We know that Sri Lanka is now in an extremely difficult time. We have seen a lot of videos and pictures from China, and many Chinese are following the updated information of Sri Lanka. You are in Colombo. Could you tell us how's the current situation now in Colombo?
Obviously, I had protests by the public. They've been ongoing for a couple of days with protests, fairly large protests over from the 9th of July up to now. But I must say broadly, it has been very peaceful. And things are slowly returning to normalcy. So even though there's been a lot of political and economic turmoil and protests, it has broadly been peaceful. And there has been very low damages caused or loss of life. So broadly, the environment is peaceful, but still the economic crisis is overhang that is clouding the economic environment in the country.
Sri Lanka rupee depreciated severely this year, and also the stock market slumped about 40%. So how do you think the current crisis to further affect Sri Lankan financial market?
I think the stock market generally is always a barometer of the greater economy. When the economy is not doing well, you can't expect the stock market also to go against that trend. The currency depreciation is actually over 80% since the rupee was floated from a peg rate of about 200. Today it's trading at 360. And we've also had the market decline about 40% so far for the year to date, from January up to date. I still believe that there is value in our market to be obtained, especially from a foreign investor perspective. You mentioned about the depreciation. So acquiring rupee assets are much cheaper than what they were before for a foreign investor. And we've also seen market declining to historical lows on our valuation. So our market is trading at a below 5 times price earnings multiple and about only 0.7 times price to book multiple, which makes it very attractive. And maybe once political stability is achieved, we may see investors coming back to our market and revive the market.
Do you think Sri Lanka has already reached the worst time?
I would like to think so. I think we've come close to the worst period. And if we can form a stable national government and continue on the path of reform, we are currently in discussions with the International Monetary Fund for a bailout for Sri Lanka. And if we can establish a solid unity government, a national government that can then bring forth these reforms, implement the reforms, and take part in IMF program, I think things will only get better. I am hopeful that towards the latter part of this year, end of 2022, that we will see the economic revival taking place.
Do you expect there will be further volatility in the financial market of Sri Lanka?
It's very difficult to predict. However, I think we won't see the volatility that we've seen previously. Up to date so far, there's been a lot of volatility with the currency depreciation, interest rates climbing very significantly with monetary policy tightening, and the market declining as well. I'm hopeful that we will see less volatility and actually a stable but a market that is slowly but surely picking up.
You took office at the end of June as the chairman of Colombo Stock Exchange. So how's the operation of the stock exchange? Is everything working smoothly?
It is quite smooth. We transitioned during COVID to be able to function the market remotely. Obviously, we have a fuel crisis. We have an energy crisis as well with power cuts. So most of the capital markets participants and investors are doing so through home, working from home. We've set up the infrastructure that the exchange can operate remotely. We did that 2 years back. Thanks to COVID, we have the infrastructure in place. So the market has functioned uninterrupted. So we don't expect any disruptions. And we believe, the Colombo Stock Exchange believes that markets should remain open, should function. even through there may be economic calamity or uncertainty.
Yes, we know that Sri Lanka's stock market closed for 2 weeks in April. So you mean this kind of situation will not happen again?
Hopefully it wouldn't happen. I think just to clarify one thing, in April, a lot of people misunderstood the closure. The closure, in fact, was over a holiday period, the traditional Sinhala Tamil New Year, the Sri Lankan New Year, that took away 3 days of holidays. So you only had a 7-day period of a market closure. The closure was not because of volatility or the economic climate. The closure was because of a fuel crisis and a power crisis. So we had 10-hour power cuts back then. We had no fuel. And the exchange felt that we couldn't operate a free and fair market for investors to participate. Now, that was the reason for the closure, not because of economic uncertainty, not because we thought there'll be huge volatility. So we did that in April. But having done that, we, like I said, are able to operate remotely. And unless otherwise the fuel crisis or the power crisis gets worse from the current levels that it is, we will look at keeping markets open.
Will you implement any measurement to stabilize the market?
I think market factors and economic factors is not something the stock exchange can control. So what we will try to do is to remain open, to have a vibrant, a free and fair market for investors to participate. Also to look at and encourage issuers to raise capital through the Colombo Stock Exchange. I don't know whether you're aware, the risk-free rate in the country today has gone over 30%. With inflation at almost 50%. So there is obviously more demand, I think, now to raise equity-based funds as opposed to debt-based funds because it's far cheaper. And we are hopeful that with that, there'll be more investors as well as issuers that will want to list and raise capital through the Colombo Stock Exchange. So that's the plan. But to very briefly answer your question, no, we don't plan to do, I would say, sort of meddle with a free and fair market being operated, even though that there is a sort of economic and political crisis in the country.
Yes, but the market still seemed quite fragile during the crisis. Do you have any long-term management to strengthen the foundation of the capital market?
We are focusing on 3 elements for the stock exchange. We have a fairly detailed strategic plan to develop our capital markets to international standards. The first pillar of that is looking at product diversification and infrastructure developments. We are looking at introducing new products, things like real estate investment trust, commodity-backed products, a dollar board, mortgage-backed securities, stock borrowing and lending that permit short selling. The second is to look at the issuer base and try and widen the issuer base, the number of companies listed on the exchange. We are also looking and hopeful that we can talk to the government and convince them to list some of the state-owned enterprises on the exchange. That will increase the market cap. And then thirdly is to look at broad-basing the investor base, which is also quite insignificant with only about 700,000 citizens participating in our exchange, but only about 60,000 active investors of that who at least trade once a year. So broad basing the investor base is also crucial. We are embarking on a strategic plan to do these 3 things. And hopefully with those implemented over the coming year, we feel that the capital markets will be in a stronger place come 2023.
The government is undergoing a lot of changes. Do you have any communication with the government? How's the communication going?
We don't directly have any communication with the government. The Colombo Stock Exchange is a member-based exchange, and we are regulated by the Securities and Exchange Commission, who is the regulator that sits on top. So we have a very open and frequent discussion with the regulator, updating them on the present market environment. Obviously, the SEC reports to the Ministry of Finance, and those establishments in government are functioning as normal. So even though there is a sort of uncertainty with the top positions in the government, including the presidency and the prime ministership, the other ministries are functioning, the regulator is functioning. So therefore, there is not too much of an impact for the Colombo Stock Exchange.
What support do you need the most at this moment?
We need to build confidence. We need to build confidence and ensure that investors are protected. So in that respect, our only request is that this current political uncertainty comes to an end soon, and a political solution within the constitution of Sri Lanka, which is legal and acceptable to all citizens, is established fast, so that political stability will then result hopefully in the IMF program being fast-tracked and economic stability being achieved thereafter. So our only request is for the political establishment to find that solution fast and to bring us back to talks with the IMF and back to economically stable environment very soon.
Given the current situation of Sri Lanka, do you think China can make any contribution to help Sri Lanka to get through the difficulties?
Very much. I think Sri Lanka needs all its friends right now, not just China, everyone. We've always been a non-aligned country. We've been we wanted to be friends with everyone around the world, and that is the approach most governments have taken. So China specifically, being a superpower, one of the biggest economies in the world, also has a lot of investment that it has made into Sri Lanka. So we very much hope that the Chinese government and the Chinese people would continue to support Sri Lanka in these very difficult times. And there could be greater cooperation in capital markets between the exchanges, between the regulators, sharing of knowledge, and maybe assistance to Sri Lanka at this time.
In what areas are there potentials for the cooperation between Sri Lanka and China's capital market?
So I think even in terms of knowledge sharing, developing our market to the standards of what China has, the learnings that we can get, knowledge sharing, all of that. But also China has quite deep pockets when it comes to the investor base, having the liquid funds that are needed. So I think right now, the main challenge for Sri Lanka is to canvas investments into the country. And these should really be non-debt related investments. They should be investments that come for the development in form of FDIs or in form of private equity investments, which will help develop the country. So I think the biggest impact can be made by investors from within China, looking at good assets to invest in Sri Lanka. And again, I would like to invite all Chinese investors to take a look at Sri Lanka. Our market is very, very attractive right now. The rupee has depreciated to historical lows, so you can't find a cheaper time to get in to Sri Lanka in form of investment. And I'm very confident, we've been a resilient nation through the last 40 years. So I am confident that the Sri Lankan people will, and the Sri Lankan economy and the country will persevere, will prosper, will go ahead. And we ask our Chinese friends to help us in that journey and to invest in Sri Lanka.
How do you envision Sri Lankan capital market in the post-pandemic period?
Our goal is to sort of be the preferred choice for anyone looking at raising capital in Sri Lanka, but to possibly be able to do that for the region as well. In that respect, we've already started a dollar board where companies can actually list equity in foreign currency form and raise within Sri Lanka. So we are hoping that the long term or medium to long term strategy is that we evolve not just in terms of a Colombo-based stock exchange, but maybe even one for the region, the South Asia region, and that's really what we hope to achieve.